today and the importance of getting the right data to build the foundations for the pan-European clinical network. But what about the reuse of paediatric data? How can that work? How can it be achieved? Well, to tell us more, I'd like to hand over now to Leary, who is a senior project manager in muscular dystrophy. Again, Newcastle University. Welcome.
Thank you. So again, I'd just like to start by saying this presentation is by me, but it's thank you to a bigger team inside of c4c in terms of leading the work package, contributing to all the work. So I want to talk about the journey towards paediatric data reuse and how we solve the many challenges involved in this. So the problem statement is similar to other people's, however, it's a bit more specific in that we think that some paediatric clinical trials fail through the poor design, and having access to data that's structured and standardized could solve this problem. Data about children is siloed often, it's not standardized and not interoperable. This is before the work of c4c anyway. And even now, clinical trial data about children is difficult to find and difficult to reuse. If we did have access to interoperable data about these clinical trials, we could design better trials by learning from past mistakes. And we also need to understand that data about children has certain specificities that doesn't apply to adults. Children grow, children go through puberty, adults have already gone through puberty. All of these things have an impact on the data. Simple barriers such as search functionality can help us to find precious pediatric data. So we had a multitude of issues and challenges to solve in the puzzle towards data reuse, and we've developed multiple project results to solve these challenges. On each of my slides, you'll see a QR code which you can scan, and that will take you directly to these resources. We also have posters in the room if people want to find out a little bit more information. So within the standards development world, there's an organization called CDISC, and my colleague John is here today. If anyone wants any specific questions about CDISC, he's just at the back there. You can give a wave. So CDISC was the standards development organization of choice for c4c, and that's because CDISC standards are mandated by some global regulators, including the FDA. So it was a sensible choice for a clinical trial network to go with CDISC standards. So although there were some standards relating to children in the CDISC suite of standards, they were scattered among other advice, and they weren't always easy to find. So what we wanted to do was create what we call a user guide, a CDISC user guide, specifically for pediatrics. And we used a consensus building methodology over 2 years to identify gaps in existing standards. We tried to identify with all of the experts within the c4c consortium which pediatric standards are most needed and most missing. And we took an approach of looking at the data items that were cross-cutting and commonly collected in pediatric clinical trials. Even that in itself is a challenge when you think about pediatric trials being from neonates right up to adolescents. But we had a wonderful working group that helped us to do this. And we now have got identified new standards as well for pediatrics that we developed in this process, and we have a collection of examples. So it's not just these are the data standards. The user guide gives examples of how to implement the standards, how to structure the data, and how to use them in a CRF. Excuse me. We also work with the expert groups of c4c that we've heard a lot about today to identify which pediatric ratings and scales were most used in pediatric studies, and then they were included. 10 of those were included in the user guide. Another result that we developed was a recipe with another IMI project called FAIR+. And this was about metadata, so data about data. Why is this important? Because if you want to find data about pediatrics and pediatric clinical trials, you need to be able to search for it. The best way to search for it is by using the identifiers within metadata. So we worked to create a metadata protocol that allows historical clinical data to be discovered and increases the chance for that to be shared and reused. The potential of this is that it could decrease the number of patients needed for new studies, and it improves the fairness of clinical trial data. This is really important because the FAIR principles allow not only human beings, but also machines to search and read data, which is critical. So the idea is that by implementing this clinical trial metadata protocol, paediatric studies and therefore paediatric data becomes more findable and potentially reusable in the future. So another exciting result is the GLOPAD, or the Global Paediatric Data Forum. So we had a workshop midway through c4c to try and look at how best to standardize that disease-specific data, which is tricky, given the number of conditions that affect children. And we learned during this workshop that there are certain tools, resources, projects that support the standardization of disease-specific data. For example, ontology developing organizations, also repositories for data. And we brought together all of these members in a workshop. And following the workshop, we set up an ongoing group called the GLOPAD. And this group meets regularly to discuss ideas for collaboration, to avoid duplication, and to hopefully in the future identify projects where we can all work together. This group is a combination of paediatric and rare disease experts, because as we've learned through the process of working with data in c4c, the challenges that face rare diseases and the challenges that face paediatric disease data are very similar. So this is a truly global group. We have representatives from the US, also from the World Health Organization, and we're now looking at sustainability planning for the future. And the QR code is there, just in case anyone else is interested in joining the GLOPAD. New members are very welcome. So the final piece of the c4c puzzle was about the project results. And we thought it was really important to make sure that everything that we learned on our journey with data harmonization we shared. Because if it isn't published, it doesn't exist. So you can see on this slide, we've been quite successful with a number of publications, both in terms of academic journals, but also publishing white papers, reports from a workshop which Mark alluded to about the European health data space and the need to ensure that paediatric data is respected within that new regulation. So again, you can look at the QR code there to see all of the papers, and there's a great poster that features them as well. So we brought all of these various pieces together to make the c4c jigsaw. So what are the benefits and impact of this? We now have a growing pool of standardized and interoperable paediatric data. We're thinking about the implementation of these FAIR data principles. That's data that's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable at a very early stage of drug development. We've raised awareness, we hope, among the consortium of the need to harmonise, reuse and share data. And in the future, we're hoping to challenge and influence policymakers and people who make the regulation to consider paediatric data. And we've future-proofed this paediatric data for innovations such as AI and machine learning in the future. So the next steps, we have a CDISC Paediatric User Network. We're still looking for members if people would like to join that. We're going to develop some training on how best to use these standards, continuation of the GLOPAD, hopefully under the c4cs. We want to create a FAIR data point for the project so that people can understand what studies c4c are doing, and finish with some final publications about the work. Sorry, I rushed a bit there at the end. But I would also like to thank, as well as all of the members of the work package, I would like to thank my team for their support and for their good humour to keep us going through this fantastic project over the last 6.5 years. Thank you.